In 1685, King Charles II fell ill. What happened next would become one of the most unusual string of events in medical history, one that blurs the line between medical care and torture. King Charles II of England died in February of 1685, and the kingdom was shocked. Rumors spread quickly after the king's sudden death. Some whispered of poisoning, others suspected political revenge. Charles II had lived through exile, civil war, and the execution of his own father. He had many enemies everywhere. And King Charles wasn't old. He hadn't been fighting any serious illness. Although he suffered from gout and joint pain, he was still active and mentally sharp. And just days earlier, he'd been walking, talking, and carrying out his normal duties as ruler of England. And then suddenly, he was gone. England wanted answers. What they got instead was one of the most extreme examples of medical care ever documented. King Charles was bled, burned, poisoned, purged, blistered, cupped, shaved, enemaed, force-fed, and chemically assaulted for 4 straight days by the most elite physicians money and royalty could buy. They put this man through the ringer, and they documented every moment of it. Their notes were meant to prove that Charles had received the finest medical care available. What those records showed instead revealed something else entirely. This is sick history. On the morning of February 2nd, 1685, 54-year-old King Charles woke up feeling sick. He wasn't frail or bedridden, and he wasn't dying. He was shaving. And without warning, the king cried out and collapsed. Witnesses said his body fell into violent convulsions. His speech became confused. His body stiffened. He began to lose control of his muscles. The King of England lay on the floor, barely conscious. And that's the moment King Charles went from bad to worse. Today, doctors believe he likely suffered a seizure or a stroke that was caused by kidney disease that had been building for years. But in 1685, doctors didn't think that way. They believed illness came from an imbalance inside the body. At the time, European medicine was based on ideas from the ancient Greek physician Galen. And according to Galenic theory, the body was controlled by 4 fluids, called humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Health was a balance of these fluids, disease was an imbalance. The king's convulsions were seen as a sign that bad humors were attacking his brain. So the solution was simple: remove them. Within minutes of his collapse, the first doctor arrived on the scene, and he did what elite medicine had been teaching for centuries. He opened a vein. About a pint of blood was drained from the king's arm immediately. And at the time, bloodletting wasn't considered dangerous. It was one of the most common medical treatments for nearly every single illness. As more physicians arrived, more blood was removed. Heated glass cups were placed on the king's skin to create suction blisters, a practice known as cupping. Small cuts were made beneath the cups to encourage bleeding. By the end of the first day, Charles had lost a significant amount of blood. He was pale and weak. His doctors saw this as a good sign. They believed the treatment was working. It wasn't. The king's condition worsened, so the doctors took his treatments to the next level. When bleeding failed to restore the king, the doctors turned to purging. Charles was forced to swallow antimony, which is a toxic metal compound known to cause violent vomiting. Antimony doesn't heal you, it poisons you until you puke. The belief was that forcing him to throw up would push anything harmful out of the body and drive disease out with it, so the king vomited, repeatedly. But when vomiting wasn't enough, the doctors escalated. He was given enemas to empty his bowels, then laxatives, then more enemas. The goal was total evacuation. His digestive system was emptied again and again. Every pathway out of the body had to be cleared. His body was being drained from every direction. Nothing harmful could remain inside. What modern medicine recognizes as dangerous dehydration, they believed was world-class care. Because if disease entered the king, it had to leave, even if it took the king with it. What they didn't understand was that they were dangerously dehydrating a man whose organs were already failing. And as the king grew weaker, the treatments became more extreme. When purging failed to restore him, the doctors attempted to burn the illness away, a practice known as counter-irritation. Charles's head was shaved completely. His bare scalp was coated with blistering agents that were designed to raise painful welts and open sores. The belief here was that dangerous humors that were trapped inside the brain could be drawn downward through the body if given a more attractive exit. So they gave him one. Blistering agents were applied to his arms and his legs. His feet were coated with irritating plasters that were meant to pull the illness downward. Some of these mixtures included pigeon droppings, which were strapped to the soles of his feet to pull the sickness as far away from the brain as possible. Charles lay in bed, exhausted, bleeding, and covered in sores, while doctors watched closely for the signs that the humors were moving out of his body. They weren't. So his doctors took things to yet another level. Over the next 4 days, the king swallowed a long list of remedies: herbal waters made from flowers, vinegars and syrups, ground pearls, chemical salts, sacred tinctures, opiates that were meant to calm his body, sweet drinks that were meant to lift his mood. All of it forced into a man who could barely keep his eyes open. As his condition worsened, the treatments became increasingly strange. One physician administered what they called spirit of a human skull. This wasn't metaphorical, it was literal. The liquid was collected from condensation inside the skull of a man who died violently and who had never been buried. This concoction was believed to be especially powerful against seizures. Another treatment involved bezoar stones, hard masses taken from the intestines of goats that were imported from the East Indies. Bezoars were thought to neutralize poison. Ironically, Charles was never even poisoned, until his doctors arrived. Doctors were running out of ideas, so they tried inducing pain as medicine. A red-hot iron was placed against the king's body. It's unclear why. Some believed it would stimulate blood, others thought it might shock the body back into balance. What is clear, though, is that it caused them intense pain. So afterward, Charles was given sugar candy to cheer him up. Pain wasn't considered a problem in early medicine. It was often seen as proof that the treatment was strong enough to work. As the days passed, more doctors crowded into the king's bedchamber. Surgeons, court physicians, and apothecaries all offered advice. More than a dozen physicians crowded the room. Each had his own ideas. Each wanted to be helpful, and no one wanted to be blamed for his death. Instead of slowing down, the king's treatments increased. More blood was taken, more purging followed, more blisters were raised. The king became weaker, yet the doctors continued. No one wanted to admit failure. Even in his terrible condition, Charles had moments of clarity. He apologized to those around him for taking so long to die. He made peace with his wife, Queen Catherine, and he expressed regret for his past behavior. He settled political and personal matters. He spoke very calmly and kindly to those at his bedside. On his deathbed, Charles quietly received Catholic last rites, a secret he'd kept hidden throughout his reign, and the doctors continued their work. His body was exhausted. He was badly dehydrated. He'd lost large amounts of blood. His skin was covered in blisters and burns. His stomach and bowels had been emptied again and again. But on February 6, 1685, 4 days after his collapse, King Charles II died. Today, historians believe King Charles II most likely died from kidney failure, made worse by gout and high blood pressure. These conditions can cause seizures and sudden collapse, but the treatments he received, especially the bloodletting and the purging, would have made recovery almost impossible. The doctors didn't intentionally kill the king. They believed they were trying to save him. And while this story sounds made up, it was meticulously documented, becoming yet another reminder that history is sicker than fiction. This isn't legend. This is sick history.